Welcome to the political polarization of patriotism and the state of democracy at America's 250th. I am Mindy Romero, director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy. So, the United States has seen increasing political polarization around patriotic symbols and expressions in recent years. The U.S. flag, other national symbols have become highly polarized and partisan, leaving many Americans reluctant, sometimes uncomfortable in displaying them to avoid signaling a political stance in whatever direction. Today, on the eve of America's 250th, we will have an important conversation with leading experts discussing the impact of politicization, of patriotism on our democracy and how we can move forward as a nation. As we all hope. And actually, just about now, I'm going to introduce folks. I just want to note for everybody, though, that there is a timely survey out by the AP NORC on Americans' feelings around the pride of being an American. And I'll put that link in a little bit later for those of you that may not have seen it, might be interested in some of that survey data. I think it overlaps really nicely with our conversation today. So, moving on to our panel. So we have an esteemed panel today of leading experts in this space on this topic. We only have an hour, so intentionally we've provided the full bios for all of our panelists. If you've registered, you have those links. We also have them on our website as well, on the page for this event. So I will not be giving detailed bios, but I will, of course, give a proper introduction here. And we'll learn certainly more about all of these individuals as we go forward today in the conversation. So we have Dr. Ted Johnson, a senior advisor at New America. Alberto Ramos, Chief Executive Officer, Veterans for All Voters. Lisa Tucker, Professor of Law at Drexel University, Thomas R. Kline School of Law, co-chair of We Hold These Truths. And we have Stephen Smith, who just joined us. Thank you. Dr. Stephen Smith, the Alfred Cowles Professor of Political Science at Yale University. We've got everybody here today. And I should note, whereas I think all of our panelists, or nearly all of our panelists, are also esteemed authors, Stephen is the recent author of a book that is relevant to our conversation, very relevant to our conversation today, really everything is, but called Reclaiming Patriotism in the Age of Extremes. So I welcome everyone to check out that book as well, if you find that of interest. And of course, again, for those of you just joining us, I'm Mindy Romero, and I'm the director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our question. The first question that we have today is going to be directed towards Stephen and Ted. Stephen, I'll ask you to take it first, since I've got your name first here. Please set the stage for us. Give us a brief overview of some of the ways patriotism has been politicized through the nation's history. We know this is nothing new, of course, nations across time and space, but give us a sense of what that looks like here, or has looked like here in the U.S. And then through that conversation, of course, please discuss, as you can, the often conflicting, we'll say, nature of patriotism within Black history in the United States, obviously since before our formal founding here in the U.S. Stephen, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can. Thank you, Mindy, for inviting me, and thank you to all the other panelists. Nice to meet you and to be part of this conversation today as we're heading into the 4th, our big national holiday, big national birthday. Right, your question is an excellent one. How has patriotism, in many ways, how has patriotism been misused? Which is, that could occupy the rest of our hour if we wanted to let it do that, but we obviously don't. But I think one of the obvious ways, and I talk about this in my book, is the way in which patriotism is often confused with, or even made synonymous with, a kind of militarized view of nationalism, that patriotism necessarily goes down the slippery slope, or goes into the rabbit hole of thinking that patriotism must be a doctrine of dividing us against them. that it must mean my country first, my country right or wrong, that it must mean some version of, as it were, almost whitewashing the sins of our countries in the past, ignoring our faults. These are all, in my view, kind of false views of patriotism. Patriotism doesn't require us. I won't go into what it doesn't. You ask me, in a way, how has, in a way, patriotism been misused? And I think those are some of the obvious ways, particularly people who think that, I'll just emphasize one, that patriotism requires us to overlook, as it were, the sins of the past and to ignore the failings of our country. I don't think, for reasons we can talk about later, I don't think that's the case, but I do think that's one way in which patriotism has been misused, or it has been kind of politicized, as you put it.
Thank you very much. Dr. Johnson, Ted.
Yeah, I very much agreed with everything that's been said, and again, thanks to you for having me on. I come at this one through the lens of a veteran, and also, obviously as a Black guy, but those experiences sort of help me frame the way patriotism operates or can operate in the States. And so through that lens, at the revolution, for a lot of Black folks that fought for the nation's independence, they were called Black patriots, and patriotism for them was an opportunity. It was the idea that national independence might also mean personal freedom. And that did not turn out to be the case for some number of folks who served, but certainly for the vast majority of Black folks in the country. But by the Civil War, now patriotism was kind of a bargain. The Emancipation Proclamation had a military utility in freeing those who were enslaved in the Confederate States. And so patriotism then, for those who served, was a way out. It was a way to now fight for the freedom that ostensibly should have been available, when fighting for independence at the nation's founding. So, but the role of patriotism sort of shifts over time as the relationship between the people seeking it and the nation does. And then by World War II, patriotism, now you've got people who are serving in the vast majority of Black folks are still in the southern states, serving in the military at high rates, often drafted, and as well as volunteers, and returning and not being able to receive the benefits that were available to other veterans who'd served. But they served anyway. Despite the democracy that wasn't available to them at home, they were going overseas to fight for, a world safe for democracy. At the time, those veterans established this campaign called the Double V campaign: victory here at home for democracy and victory abroad. And so for them, patriotism was a claim on equal citizenship, a claim on justice, a claim on the equal protection that the Constitution, provides, in the Reconstruction Amendment in particular. So today, what is patriotism, especially for folks that have been marginalized over time? And this is many groups now, not just talking about Black folks. But now that the United States is more accessible than it has been for most folks in the past, what is patriotism today? And it is an open question because of the very reasons that Stephen explained. It is somewhat a signifier of one's politics, of their partisan leanings. It has been weaponized and hijacked by groups who don't believe in like colorblind equality or the state being the people being the voice that the state must be responsive to. So it's an open question, and that means that how to express patriotism when it's a contested framework, a contested word, is also difficult. The way folks in inner city Baltimore express patriotism may look very different from at the Iowa State Fair, but it doesn't mean that the love of country is different. It just means that the expression may not, the patriotism in one place doesn't always look the same everywhere. So it's a complicated topic. What better time to explore it than at the nation's semi-quincentennial?
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And for those that would like to just have a bit more information on our panel, in case you don't have your registration information at hand, we've put that information into the chat. All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. And Lisa, I'll ask you, what meanings do people associate with I know we've Ted and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Smith have both talked about this from one perspective, but tell us a little bit more about today and what you see, the ways you see people associate meaning with patriotism. What is this? What are the impacts, or why is this? What are the impacts on the state of our democracy from this? And then please feel free to throw in kind of, beyond that, just what are the stakes here in terms of our society more broadly?
Sure. So, yes, a broad question and an important one. And I want to say that I tend to see things through a legal lens. I am a lawyer and a law professor. And so a lot of my research and scholarship has been around the institutions of democracy and how those play into patriotism. So I have a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share. I think the first idea is about how we define what it means to be a patriot. And as Dr. Smith and Dr. Johnson mentioned, I think that can mean different things in different places. But I think there's real dichotomy that we're looking at between people who believe that patriotism means following our leaders and doing what government, has in store, and not objecting, not contradicting those in power whom we have elected. And I think there's another group of people who believe that inherent to patriotism is this idea that we speak truth to power, that we're constantly working on this American experiment, so to speak, and trying to make it better, very much like Dr. Smith said, in addressing wrongs. And so challenging policies, challenging laws, always trying to use the past to improve, or perhaps the present to improve. And I think that we're seeing that right now between people who are unwilling to, maybe because of cognitive dissonance, understand that people in power are also flawed. And that does not mean that we have to, as patriots, agree with or follow everything or defend everything that they say. The second thing that I think is that inherent to a view of patriotism, and I follow the Supreme Court very, very closely, and many people who are in this webinar may be familiar with the birthright citizenship case that was decided yesterday. And I think this is a great example of a definition of patriotism. I think there are many, many people who believe that a very important part of being an American is that you are here, you have been here for generations, that being an American means, that something about your right to be in this country. And there are others who feel like patriotism means that our country has always been this woven fabric of our ancestors coming from other places, whether willingly or unwillingly, and being put into this fabric of American society. And so that this concept of all of us being from other parts of the world and bringing these different perspectives is the very essence of what it is to be an American, and that you can become an American and pledge allegiance to the Constitution, perhaps in becoming a citizen, without having to have been born here, your grandparents born here, or anything else like that. One more point I wanted to make about this, and it's because I really do watch the Supreme Court very, very closely. And one thing that I think about a lot is that over the front door of the Supreme Court is what some view as the motto of the Supreme Court, and that's equal justice under law. And when I think about patriotism or democracy, I often think about what does that mean, equal justice under law. And to the extent that many people are asking themselves today about whether the Supreme Court justices themselves are patriotic, are they serving our country, or are they serving some cause that's inconsistent with the Constitution, I think it really comes down to how they view that slogan. Are they more concerned about the justice part, or are they more concerned about the law part? And what do they perceive? How do they perceive that justice and law fit into that concept of democracy and patriotism? And historically, the views on which was more important, if one is, justice and law, have been very, very, it's been controversial. For example, when Oliver Wendell Holmes went on the court, a friend of his who was a judge said to him, "Do justice, sir." And Holmes said, "That is not my job. My job is to apply the law." But Justice Breyer, about 15 years ago, in a written statement, said that the court's central purpose is the administration of justice to all who seek it. So part of being a patriot, I think, is thinking about how do we value the Constitution? What are we looking for from the Constitution in upholding it? And who is doing that hard work?
Thank you very much. All right. So, Alberto, as the CEO of Veterans for All Voters, I need to ask you here, since our nation's founding, there has been an enduring, of course, deep relationship between patriotism and military service. What does this look like today? Within our current political climate, has the way that the public interacts with the military been impacted in any way? And please discuss, of course, as you cover that question, the mission of your organization as well, because it's quite relevant to today.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. And I could talk about this for an hour, so I obviously won't. I'll try to keep it short. Thank you for having us. And I'm honored anytime that I get to see Ted Johnson. He's a incredible patriot, veteran, and someone I admire really deeply, and glad to be on this panel with all of you. So this is the 250th anniversary. That's part of what brings this group together today. I have been thinking a lot recently about the fact that our founding fathers were veterans. Most of them were veterans of the Revolutionary War, the wars that preceded it, and many of them the wars that followed it. At Veterans for All Voters, we really admire the farewell address that George Washington gave when he left the presidency. He was talking about the dangers of partisanship. And he said the name of American must always exalt the just pride of patriotism, that there's something that brings us together that is more important than all of these many things, and especially in the case of the speech he was giving, partisanship that divide us, and that patriotism is a good thing, this feeling of belonging and unity. He talked about the people who had fought in the Revolutionary War being one patriotic band of brothers. And I just take a lot of inspiration from those ideas. Ted knows this. I know this. When you join the military, you are forced into a situation where you are surrounded by people who come from every state, every background. They pray to different gods. They have different perspectives, have seen the world through different eyes, and they are standing beside you wearing the exact same uniform. And you are trying to accomplish a mission together. And I think it's just a really beautiful thing. And it's had its challenges throughout our history, of course. But at the core of you are with someone who is fundamentally different from you, I think it really creates a sense for what our country is and what it could become, the ways in which we're unified rather than the ways in which we are divided. At Veterans for All Voters, we work to sort of take that sense of unity and turn it into civic action. We work in the systemic election reform space, getting veterans and military family members on the ground in their communities to advocate for a stronger, more representative, more participatory democracy, and one that holds our elected leaders accountable to the people that they're meant to serve. And I could go into the weeds about the exact policies that we're advocating for, but at its core, it's is our system working for the people that it's meant to serve, for everyday Americans, for a majority of people within a district, or for the partisan minorities? And so that's the work that we're doing at Veterans for All Voters, really trying to work at the grassroots level and the grass tops level, what we call the grass blade, people, veterans especially, and their family members who care so deeply about our country. They care so deeply about their community and their neighbors. And the last thing that I want to say here in the Navy, and Ted knows this too, we have sort of this order of hierarchy. You say God, country, ship, shipmate, self. The self is the last part of that system of hierarchy, this sense of selflessness. And oftentimes I think about it in reverse, that like you have to take care of yourself, and then you have to take care of your neighbors. You have to take care of the people around you. You have to take care of your country. And then you can, care for the faith that you're a member of, the God that you pray to, whatever it may be. But that like community connection is so important today in a moment in time when we've lost faith in so many of our institutions. The military is one place where Americans haven't lost faith. There's still immense trust in the military. We take off the uniform at some point and we become veterans, and we enter the community and we become faith leaders or little league coaches, teachers, whatever it may be. Maintaining that trust is really important. And I think especially as it relates to our system of political representation in our country.
Thank you. All right. So my next question really is for all of you. So I'll ask, Alberto, you just went. I'll ask you to jump in first on this question. But where does this leave Americans who may be feeling reluctant or uncomfortable? And I realize, of course, fully that I'm giving just one set of possibilities there, right? Displaying patriotic symbols, right? The flag outside a home on the 4th of July, right? Something we're expecting to see in high numbers. But what does that look like, right, for Americans that may be feeling whatever exactly the word is for them, right? To avoid possibly signaling or concerns around what it means or what it says to them. Maybe it's not about signaling a political stance, but maybe it's just reflecting, right, kind of where they're at with their patriotism today. How pervasive do you think this is, right, in your conversations, in the work that all of you do, and why? So let's just kind of break this open a little bit and really talk about this. Alberto, can you go first, please?
Yeah. And I'm basically here to be a cheerleader for Ted. Ted wrote a great book. He's written several books. He's written a great book on this. And he sort of started this entire conversation talking about the Double V campaign. There's a book, Half American, right behind me that I love talking about the Double V campaign as well. One of my personal heroes, kind of unknown hero in history, is a guy named James Armstrong, who was in Selma at the Edmund Pettus Bridge during Bloody Sunday. And he carried the American flag at the front of the line. He was beaten and bloodied, ended up going to the hospital afterwards, as so many people did on Bloody Sunday. He was carrying that flag and he refused to let it touch the ground. And every single anniversary of Bloody Sunday after that, he would stand at the front of the line carrying the American flag. And nobody gets to hijack what patriotism means for our country. If someone like James Armstrong had every reason, the people in the Double V campaign that Ted referenced had every reason to feel disenchanted with our country, to feel like they want to check out and they don't want to engage. They don't want to uphold this mantle of patriotism. But James Armstrong refused to do that. And so nobody gets to hijack what those symbols mean to us, what patriotism means to us, what military service means, if James Armstrong refused to let them do that. And so I don't know that I'm answering your question directly, but that's what comes to mind for me, at least.
Thank you. And I'll jump from there and ask Ted to address the question next. And please, at the same time, Ted, give a full reference to your book, and my apologies for not mentioning it.
No, thanks for that. And it's a big question, and I think my gut response is to tell people to just reclaim it. Like, don't allow it to be hijacked. Like, as you said, like, don't allow the flag to touch the ground. And if you feel like one side is has claimed it for themselves, then fly it yourself. But it's easier said than done. I remember a study from Google, or a study from Stanford using Google data some years ago that tracks the like when you want to look at the houses on a street or something, you look at the Google view that shows you the 360. They use that data and found that the more American flags that are in a neighborhood, the more Republican that neighborhood votes. And so patriotism, just the expression, the outward expression of it, codes partisan. And it's very difficult to say, oh, no, I'm not flying this American flag because I'm a Republican. I'm flying it because I'm an American at a time when the flag itself codes a particular way. I've got instances from social media of kindergartnners identifying the American flag with the current president and not the country. So it's just, I mean, it's a hijacked symbol. But I guess what I kind of want to say is that the way to overcome this hijacking is I sort of pull this from like the sociology of solidarity, and it's the way large communities establish trust in one another when it's impossible to really know one another in communities that are so large. My philosophy is bad, so I don't know if it's Plato or Aristotle. One of those folks said that the city-state was basically as big as a human society could function, where people felt connected enough to the world that they lived in and anonymous enough to where they could still be an individual. And so it's very difficult in a nation of 350 million people that don't share religion, that don't share a heritage, that don't share, in some places, not even a common language often, certainly dialects are not, to all of a sudden believe that they are one people. And so some of it, and this has been talked about here, is that you find patriotism locally. Even though it's a national sort of feeling or sentiment, you find it and experience it locally. And I think that connects to this idea of where people can feel belonging and not feel lost in the mix. And then the second thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is that the way you develop solidarity in these instances is not transactional. It's not, I love the country gives me this, or I trust my neighbor, so we exchange, and then that trust is only duplex in communication. It only goes one to one. But the way to build solidarity is when you do something for someone else, expecting nothing in return, and then that person does something for a third person, expecting nothing in return. And now the culture is that you do things for people you don't know because that's how we do it here. And so the reclamation of our national symbols requires both a very local practice, but also a sort of a national sense of how do I build trust with democratic strangers, such that in a moment of war or protest or threats to our safety, that we can depend on one another because of the trust that's been sort of built within a society. Easy to theorize, very difficult to execute and put in practice.
Thank you. And your emphasis on trust, as we said at the outset, right? The politicization of patriotic symbols, right, such as the flag, is nothing new. I've taught political sociology classes for years, and often we'll just have a whole session with students on what the American flag in the different contexts and how it can have different meanings, right? If it's next to George Washington, if it's next to the current president, if it's next to Spider-Man on a Marvel movie, if it's an image of the flag being burned, it has different meanings. But what I'm struck by is the stakes are higher, right, when we talk about trust with our fellow Americans. Yeah. Stephen, Dr. Smith, can you please tackle that question? I'm happy to repeat it if you'd like.
No, Stephen, please. First of all, I just want to say I couldn't agree more with what I heard from Ted and Alberto. I doubt that I could say anything that would improve upon that or really add to it. I just want to make a handful of sort of random, related but random points. One of the inspirations for writing my book about patriotism was an experience I had, which I talk about in the book, a number of years ago on the 4th of July. We had been invited to a friend's home in a suburban neighborhood of New Haven, and about 10 people were gathered, and the hostess of the evening asked us, did we feel patriotic? And there was a distinct, you could feel it, a distinct discomfort with that question. Did people feel patriotic? They were uncomfortable with it. Nobody said it, but you could just kind of feel it. And after doing this, we read aloud the Declaration of Independence, and then we tucked into our hamburgers and hot dogs and went ahead. But that experience stuck with me. Why did people feel kind of uneasy with the sense of being patriotic? And that's kind of what led me down the path to be thinking about this. I want to talk about a moment, too, about the military and patriotism, which came up earlier. I was not in the military, so I don't speak from first-hand knowledge here. But every year, I participate in a program at Yale called the Warrior Scholars Program, which brings military people who are transitioning out of the military and going to be entering college. And they spend, usually they're in their 30s somewhere. They've usually been in the military, 10, 12, sometimes longer. And they come to Yale for 2 weeks of kind of college boot camp, what college will be like. And I always lead a seminar with them on the Declaration of Independence, where we read the text. Many of them have never read it before. Our national mission statement. They've been in the service, but they've never read our national. We read it together and then spend basically 90 minutes doing a kind of close reading and how does it sound and so on. And that to me is always one of my great teaching experiences every year, meeting these youngish people from my point of view. They're still young, my age. But they're lovely, lovely people, and it's an honor to be able to give them a sense of what college is like and giving them, I hope, a renewed appreciation of what America stands for. I'll give one example about the flag that I think is important, because I can't agree more. Again, I can't agree more with what I've heard about. We should reclaim the flag. You shouldn't allow those on the, might say, other side just to monopolize it. I'll give an example, may be controversial in this group. I don't know. But I was in Israel in August of 2023, just sort of like 2 months before the October 7th. And one evening in Jerusalem, just kind of on the spur of the moment, a friend of mine, we joined. There were big protests in the street against the government's attempt to, basically strip the Supreme Court of any right to be able to check the government. We joined this protest, and one of the things that was striking about it to me, most striking about it, is the way in which the protesters were all, not every single one, but the protest was wrapped in Israeli flags. They were not going to let an extremist government, define what the country stood for. And I thought that is exactly a great statement of how American protest should take place, which unfortunately it doesn't. We never see the American flag for the most part at protest movements. But Americans should take a lesson from this and how we need to reclaim the flag, not just for one group, but for all of us. That I think is so important. And I took a lesson from that, and I've written a little bit about it, and I just wanted to share it, the example, with the panelists and your audience today. I'm sorry, I don't want to go on too long, but Lisa, I have one question. Your comment prompted me to think about, because once again, I'm not a lawyer. I only followed the Supreme Court from what I read in the newspaper. Basically, I was pleased with the birthright decision yesterday, but amidst all of the congratulations for it, I cannot help but notice 3 of the judges, were prepared to overturn the birthright citizenship. That, to me, is disturbing. And for a group that declares they believe in the black letter of the law. They three of them were prepared to junk this, and that can't be good. So I don't know. Maybe if you have a thought about that, I'm sure you do. I'd love to hear it. Anyway, that's where I am. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa, you're next for this question, but feel free also to address what Stephen put out there.
Incredibly alarming. Incredibly alarming.
And actually, if I may, I just want to make sure folks know that they can put questions into the Q&A, which we'll get to after our last panel question. Thank you, Lisa. Go ahead.
Sure. So, of course, the justices swear to uphold the Constitution. And what we have seen in the last decade more is a view of what that means and interpreting the Constitution to mean, are we doing a neutral interpretation, which, of course, people have denied that the Supreme Court or that the federal courts are political bodies. And of course they are. Of course they are. But we've seen much more of an overt display of that over the last decade. And these justices, who I think we can really question as to whether they're upholding their oath to faithfully apply the law and interpret the Constitution. So yes, it's very alarming. It's very alarming to know that, if in fact Justice Alito retires, which I think he probably is going to, and we could talk about that all day long, but who might be in that seat next? Who might go even further than Justice Alito? So yes, I find it incredibly alarming. If I may, I would like to play the devil's advocate here for a minute. And I would like to say that I did not know the story that Alberto brought up about the guy with the flag and not letting it touch the ground. And I find that incredibly compelling and brave. At the same time, I think that turning the flag into a symbol that is inviolate is incredibly dangerous. And Stephen mentioned that we don't see American flags at protests. And in fact, I think we do. A great example is in 1989, when Gregory Lee Johnson was protesting outside of the Republican convention in Dallas, Texas, by burning an American flag. And he was arrested. He was fined. And the Supreme Court decided in that case that part of our free speech, part of our First Amendment right, is to desecrate the flag if we want to, that the flag is not a symbol that is holy and sacred, and that one way we can express ourselves is by declining to respect the flag. I know this has come up for me a lot because we are huge professional football fans in our family, and we have season tickets to the Eagles. And so we go to all the home games. And at many home games, I have to make a choice between saluting the flag or not. And I think that it's actually incredibly powerful to say, I reject this flag. I reject this flag and how it's being used as a symbol of patriotism that I do not agree with. And I have enormous respect for the athletes who have taken a knee and said, I'm not going to be part of a sham that people are trying to get the flag to represent. I also think that in very recent history, the flag has been dangerous. We know that on January 6th, when the Capitol was stormed, the members of Congress who were in the chamber were minutes away from being attacked. And a piece of advice they were given from, whatever that is, the podium, or I don't know what we call it in the House, but, the place where, the big place up at the front, was take off your flag pins. Take off your flag pins. And many members of Congress refused to take them off. But the idea was you can be identified by that flag pin, and you are going to be the victim of violence if they know that you are a member of Congress. And yet, people on both sides wearing that flag pin as a symbol of their patriotism and as a symbol of their willingness to try to uphold the Constitution and uphold the will of the people and do good in our country. So if I can, demonize just a little bit this concept that this flag is sacred, and I think we should be objecting to that flag more.
If I could just really quickly respond. I mean, I'm not going to sort of respond one way or the other about desecrating the flag. That's not really my place. And there's an entire legal argument there that I'm not a lawyer and wouldn't pretend to understand. I think my point, just to be clear, was less about.
No, sure, Alberto. All Americans should understand our First Amendment rights, and I know you do.
Yeah, absolutely. My point was less about desecration of the flag as a symbol and more about James Armstrong's sentiment of patriotism. And if he chose to associate that with the flag and he chose to carry that at the anniversary of Bloody Sunday every single year until he just passed away a couple of years ago, that there's incredible beauty in that. This sense of responsibility to our country, to one another, to our neighbors. And that's the thing that I don't want to be hijacked. But yes, I agree. We can protest in different ways. We can show our frustration with our country or with its government in different ways. And I have no questions about that.
I don't think we disagree at all. And I'm really excited that you told that story. I want to read more about Mr. Armstrong.
Well, I should say, first of all, Lisa immediately discredited herself in that by identifying herself as an Eagles fan, which or I think an Eagles fan.
Now, we were going to keep this nice, everybody.
But I would say, as somebody, I get it, but I don't entirely agree with it. We have First Amendment rights. I get that. It's fine. Doesn't mean we always have to be displaying them 24/7. I go, and now I'll make myself immediate unpopular with most. I go to many New York Yankees games. My team. I know you're shock and horror, and I always find the saying of the national anthem a very kind of ennobling experience. There I am in the stadium with thousands of people. Probably many of them hold views that would be quite different from mine. It's true. But I find it a kind of stirring moment of national pride, even if we may understand what that means in very different ways. And usually when the national anthem is sung by somebody with a great voice and something, it's really makes it a moment to me of significance. So I don't know. I'll just throw that out there. I mean, I recognize Colin Kaepernick and taking the knee and all that. There was a kind of took courage to do that. I admire him, even though you can agree with it or not. But I do think it was he expressed a kind of courage in that and took a lot of heat for it too, clearly. But
and not just heat, he was not allowed to play, if I'm right. He lost his income. There's a nobility in that, I think.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah, I just want to say, when the military disposes of flags, the way that it does it properly is to burn them. And so, like, the burning of the flag the act itself only takes on the meaning of the person conducting the act. And I think that when you are using the flag to protest as an expression of your First Amendment rights and maybe dissatisfaction with government writ large, the use of the flag for that purpose is both a constitutional use and I think a patriotic use of the flag. Because of the symbol's power, it's almost the perfect thing to protest. You don't want to protest the thing that no one has any value in. But if the protest is about destruction or about division or hatred, then just because the flag was used in protest or just because it was burned doesn't make the act ennobling. It's not noble. So the more these debates get into the public, they sort of get reduced down to these, love the flag or don't. And what I love here is that we're expressing the exact sentiments about the flag, as I think we all feel about patriotism, is that it's not a binary feeling. It's a complicated, complex set of feelings that sometimes looks like you don't love the country when you're trying to hug it tighter, and sometimes looks like you love the country when you're trying to get some distance from it. And that complexity is what makes both the concept so beautiful, but like the just the intricacy of the uniqueness, the distinctiveness of the American experience. A beautiful thing to celebrate at 250.
Alberto said he was here just to like applaud Ted Johnson. I think I've now joined that club. I'm in the Ted Johnson fan club.
Gaining fans by the moment.
I'll take it.
And I would, if I may, I'll just add on a bit there. Speaking of the nuance and the complexity, there's also just differing meanings, right? And what can seem to function, at least, as a disconnect between meanings. What the person that is using that patriotic symbol, the flag or otherwise, what they mean versus how other people are interpreting that, right? Based on different contexts, but also different placement, different statuses. So it's complicated. All right. So let's move on to our last question. And speaking of reclaiming, right, the flag, reclaiming the notion of patriotism. So I know we've covered some of this, but I want to ask you just to directly, each of you, talk about this. So how are some Americans reclaiming the notion of what it means to be patriotic? And why is this important for the future of U.S. democracy? What would you say to your fellow Americans, who may be feeling this way on the eve of our 250th, with celebrations around the corner, right? Not just at the national level, but at the local level, as we've already noted. Who wants to jump in on that? I'd like all four of you to take a stab at it, but feel free to jump in if somebody finds it more urgent in the moment.
I'll take a shot if you want. When you introduced me, you said that I was the co-founder of an organization called We Hold These Truths. And We Hold These Truths was designed to address this current moment in history and very much about patriotism, getting us back to fundamental truths about our country on which everybody agrees. So in the United States, we have kind of an unusual way of analyzing the law, and it's called analogy and distinction. And what we do is we take facts in a case that we have right now, and we compare those facts to facts in already decided cases. And it's an important tool in helping us understand how should we decide this case. But analogy and distinction can really be manipulated, because if you want to say that two things are the same, you can always find a way where they're the same. You just have to get more general. And if you want to say that two things are different, you can always find a way that they're different. You just have to get more specific. And so one of the goals for me of helping to engender patriotism and more unity in this country is to help people find those points of agreement where, even though we might disagree on the specifics, we agree on the general principles. So to give you an example, I think everybody would agree that voting and having majority opinions prevail is an important foundational concept of our democracy. And I think everybody wants that to happen. Where we disagree is on the hows and the whys and the whos, right? And so being able to get us back to a point where we stop the constant, I disagree with you on the specifics, and getting back to the generalities of these are things that we value about our country and our constitutional system. And if we can have those conversations, I think we're going to find that people are able to enter into better conversations, and that eventually this atmosphere of enemy lines might be able to be softened.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll just do the teacher thing here, and I'll call on Alberto. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. I think we should all support the U.S. team in the World Cup match tonight, and support the team that your families might have come from. But I'm here at Veterans for All Voters, and we believe really deeply. There's a lot of research out there. The National Conference on Citizenship has this really great study showing that veterans continue to serve in their communities at far higher rates than our civilian counterparts. We volunteer at higher rates. We vote at higher rates, run for office. We are faith leaders, Little League coaches, all of those things. at far higher rates than everybody else. And Ted mentions working locally, sort of regaining that faith in what democracy looks like locally. For us, that sort of civic participation is trying to fix our democracy, which is not representative. It's not participatory in the ways that it should be. And so I would push a lot of people to think about the systems that create hyperpolarization, that create divisiveness. I do not believe that that's what we see when we see our neighbors. I think we find that we love our neighbors, that we want to be close to our neighbors. We want what's best for our neighbors and for our schools and for our kids and all of those things. But these sort of national systems are fundamentally broken and enhance and magnify a feeling of divisiveness. So in whatever ways you can get involved in your democracy, do it, especially at the local level. I would advocate for helping us fix this system. But there are so many things that people can do to kind of repair the social fabric. And one of those things is celebrating a hopeful U.S. win tonight in the World Cup.
Thank you. Stephen, would you like to tackle that? And certainly feel free to take it. This is closing thoughts at the same time.
Just a thought. It does seem to me, I just want to put in a plug for democracy and patriotism, because it does seem to me democracies, more than other styles or types of government, require patriotism. Because why? Because power not only flows from the top down, but from the bottom up. An autocracy, which is just governed from the top, doesn't particularly require its citizens to be loyal and patriotic to it. But democracies do. And that is a theme. I mean, I teach political theory here. That's a theme that all of the great political philosophers from the Greeks onward understood, that democracies require a patriotic sentiment. And that means two things, or at least in my view, it means two things. It means taking a kind of noble pride in your country's accomplishments, to celebrate our national achievements. And yet, I mentioned earlier, that doesn't mean ignoring our shortcomings, because the flip side of pride is shame, and feeling a sense of shame for our shortcomings and our failures is equally a part of our what it means to be patriotic. Confronting our failures. Just to give an example or two, no one ever accused Ronald Reagan of being unpatriotic, but did he not apologize to Japanese American citizens for their internment during World War II? Was that seen as unpatriotic? Or take the example of the Tuskegee Airmen and veterans of color who did not receive the awards, Congressional Medal of Honor and other such awards, because of their skin color, and that was later recognized as was that no, it wasn't. It was the attempt to enlarge who is part of the American family by a kind of honest reckoning with failures of the past based on racism and other forms of discrimination. So pride and shame are equally parts of patriotism, and I would encourage, last word on this, as we confront, or as we approach the 4th, rather. Two texts I would recommend. One is that everybody should, as I mentioned earlier, should read the Declaration of Independence, but they should also consider reading Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is the 4th of July," which was one of the great, American speeches ever given, one of the greatest pieces of American oratory, and is up there, I would put it, along with the Declaration, as a statement of American and national identity.
Thank you very much. Ted, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, I love the Douglas reference. And I just want to say very quickly on that, if you read that, and you should, note The first section, all he does is praise the founders and the values on which the country was founded. And then he indicts them for denying those very high-minded principles to a group of folks. So it's not just an indictment. It's not just critique. It is also love of country alongside it. It was Baldwin who said, I love this country so much that I insist on the right to critique her. And I think, to me, that is what real patriotism looks like. I'll say very quickly, I often get asked about, like, okay, so what do I do tomorrow? I hear your arguments. That sounds good. What do I do tomorrow? And I tell folks, make new friends, as in make new kinds of friends. Our social circles are homogenous. If you look at my Facebook page, it's probably 80% college-educated Black people from the South that went to church at some point in their lives. So even with my military service, even then, as I've traveled the world and I live in a different place from where I grew up, it's narrowed because unless I intentionally exercise that muscle by getting out beyond just what I'm familiar with to include people. So get to know, the person of a different generation who's working the grocery store, cashier. Get to know folks that are a different race than you, a different class than you, and sort of, and not. It doesn't mean you got to throw dinner parties. I just mean, like, get to be on a first name basis with someone, or at least say hello, and being able to appreciate the people that you live in America with. I think gives you a deeper appreciation for the potential that our country has. So that's sort of my advice to folks is to get to know more people, and you'll find plenty of reason to love the country.
Thank you. So being social and making friends is an act of patriotism. So whatever.
Which is difficult for introverts like me. Easier said than done again.
Thank you all. Just quickly, I'm looking at the Q&A. We have two items here. I think one is more of a comment, although we really appreciate the expression of how this person's feeling. It says, I live in a very liberal, progressive community. I have discomfort myself in hanging my flag this 4th. I don't know how to navigate this. So I think we've talked some of that already. And then lastly, if you all don't mind, maybe we'll leave here with asking you to answer this question with just one quick item. So the question is, if you feel comfortable, what types of personal patriotism do you display in your personal lives, whether that's a bumper sticker or flying flags or anything like that? Anybody want to tackle that? Not necessarily the most important thing here on the fly, but what do you do? How do you express your patriotism?
Yeah, for me, quickly, I'll say I just use the word. I don't run from calling myself patriotic. And I feel like my use of the word and my politics and my look being different from whatever the stereotype of it is an act of reclamation in and of itself.
Thank you. Lisa, were you going to jump in?
Every election day, I'm part of a group of people that make sure that everyone can access the polls and everyone has a right to vote, regardless of political party, regardless of, ideology. Our goal is to enfranchise voters and make sure that they have a way to get to the polls, that they're accepted to the polls, and that they can cast their vote. And so I think that's something that's really important to me.
Thank you. Stephen.
I would sort of just go along with what Ted said about this, too. I'm a teacher, and I, in a very, like the question who's from a very, I teach in a very liberal community. And one of the things I do is you don't run away from the term. I don't use classes and teaching to be a propagandist, but I don't run away from the term, and I make an occasion when appropriate to bring up the topic. And as I'm going to do in a class next week, where I've been invited to be a guest speaker on this topic. So I think it's important to not run away from the term. Don't be a bully about it. You don't have to be a propagandist, but show people that someone within a liberal framework and a liberal environment can be a kind of, as I would say, a reflective patriot or a thinking patriot, something like that.
Thank you. And Alberto, last word. What do you do?
I'll be having a beer tonight celebrating a U.S. soccer win.
Okay. That's a good way to end. That was a good question. It took us over a little bit, but I really do appreciate that. And hopefully people will inspire others as well, right? By you all sharing. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to remind everybody that we have recorded this. We'll package it up professionally and get it out within a week. And we will cut it up into some bite-sized pieces for folks that want to hopefully share. We think this is an important conversation, obviously, and one that we don't have enough. This type of conversation, we don't have it enough in our society. We want to encourage people to be brave, to be open, to be honest, to talk about whatever they see as patriotism, but certainly the barriers or opportunities, right, that they're feeling in their everyday lives. And how can we together, again, kind of talk about these things and make this a more open topic for all. So I want to thank my esteemed panelists, Lisa Tucker, Stephen Smith, Alberto Ramos, and Ted Johnson. Thank you all again very much for bringing your experiences and your different perspectives. I think this has been a great conversation. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.